I'm so excited to be part of this panel and meet these amazing women. Together they represent every aspect of STEAM. Our first panelist is Dr. Susan Hockfield, President Emerita of MIT. Dr. Hockfield was the first woman and the first biologist to lead the Institute and championed many breakthroughs emerging from the convergence of multidisciplines. This is especially meaningful because convergence research is the model that ARCS was founded on and that continues to inspire us every day. On this panel, Dr. Hockfield represents the S in STEAM science. Welcome, thank you. Our next guest is Livesay with a career spanning more than 37 years at NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, JPL. Earlier this year, she was named Deputy Director and COO, supervising a team of 6,000. Let me say that again, 6,000. And managing more than 36 flight missions and science instruments. On this panel, Leslie represents the T, E, and M for technology, engineering, and mathematics. Welcome. Thank you. Our third and final panelist is Dr. Sharon Nazarian, the president of the Younes and Soraya Nazarian Family Foundation. Welcome. For 5 years, Sharon served as the Anti-Defamation League's Senior VP in International Affairs, heading ADL's work fighting anti-Semitism and racial hatred globally. She is also an adjunct professor of political science at UCLA and a member of the Nazarian Enterprises. On this panel, Sharon rounds out STEAM with entrepreneurship, arts, and humanities. Welcome. All right, so let's get started. Susan, first question is for you. All right. So as a pioneer in your field, especially at MIT, what kind of struggles did you have to overcome, both personally and professionally?
You know, there are a lot of just practical struggles that I think everyone goes through. For a woman, I think that in retrospect, I think of any number of ways where things were harder. And one that really comes to me, most profoundly now is there isn't a team. If you're one of 50 or one of 40 or whatever the number is, it's very hard to build a team. And I think that as I think about how people's careers progress, having people who are on your side when you're in the really tough times is probably the most important thing you have. And in retrospect, I wish I had paid more attention to building a team, to finding allies, friends with whom I could talk about things in the really toughest times. If you're the minority, if you're the person who's the new kid on the block, you're not going to confess to the other people on the block that you're having a moment of crisis of confidence. So I think that it's something that you can do for yourself that I think is really important.
Great, thank you. So for all the students that kind of cringe when it's like, I have to work in a group or a team, we heard it from Susan herself. Teams are so important, people that you can be able to count on and depend on. So Leslie, the next question is for you. What does your new position at JPL mean to you when you think about where your passion for your field started from?
So I would say that throughout my whole career at JPL, and I've had probably 3 or 4 ARCs to my career in this amount of time, I would say that the theme that was there when I started and is still there today is the love for space. And what we learn every day in this endeavor is amazing, but it really is humbling too, because you realize how much you just do not know. And I would say that has stayed with me, that passion for space throughout my career.
Very cool. Thank you for talking about how your career is continuing to discover and explore. Appreciate that. For Sharon, you've had an incredible journey. Going back to your childhood to now, With how big of an influence you have made through your experiences, what would you recommend as a first step for someone who wants to also make a positive influence, but doesn't know where to begin?
First of all, I want to acknowledge how amazing it is to sit on this panel with these amazing women, and how wonderful it is for you students out there to have, especially these two women, to really listen to and hear from. I'm really privileged to be here with both of you. My life experience, I come from an immigrant family, born in Iran. We were displaced because of the revolution. And for me, I've jotted down 3 or 4 ideas that kind of encapsulated my journey. First of all, really begin with who you are. You know yourself, and really lean into that. Lean into your life journey and what your life experience has brought you. Second, invest in being bridge builders. That's been such a big part of my life. Both culturally, professionally, in so many ways. We all tend to live in our own little bubbles, and those of you who can really be bridge builders, who can connect different worlds to another, different communities to one another. Look at the work that you were showcasing outside. It's a multidisciplinary world. That's about connecting different worlds. So being bridge builders, I think, is really important. And then finally, paving new grounds. Dare to dream big. That's what that said to me. All those projects out there. You're dreaming big, and dare to do that. And one of the beauties of being in this country, in the United States, is that those dreams can come true. Many of us come from countries where you're born into a certain part of society and you kind of stay there. And this country, the United States, allows you to really dream big and reach them. So those are my 3 ideas that I wanted to share.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Hope everybody was taking notes. Those are some beautiful gems. Appreciate that. So this question is for all of our panelists, and whoever would like to start off answering, that's fine. So if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give to yourself? As well as you can think about what advice would you give to today's university students?
Can I just kick it off and start with the university thing? So something I didn't do until I think it was my junior year in college, that precipitated my knowing what I wanted to do with my life, was go to office hours. And so now I tell students whenever I get a chance, go and talk to your professors. They want to talk to you, but they can't approach you. It's up to you to approach them. And office hours are a time where they're sitting around waiting for someone to show up. And some people can show up with problems, but guess what? You can just show up with questions. And it's just so helpful to reach out and say, get different insights on things. And I'll tell you about what changed my life is I knew kind of somewhere in my mind, my heart, that I was drawn to biology, to understanding how things work, that I just liked, studying plants and anything that was that had a structure that I could understand if I just dug a little deeper. And so I thought I was supposed to go to medical school, and that didn't sit very comfortably with me. But that's what you did if you were interested in science. In any case, late in my junior year, I had a class that was just fantastic. My first fantastic class at college. I was in heaven. It was about this new emerging world of cell biology and dissecting cells down to their component parts. And I was just, it was fantastic. And the professor asked a question in class, and just as the class ended, he didn't ask for answers. And so for the first time, in the entire time I was at college, I went to office hours. And I said, he asked this question, and it seems to me this would be a good way to solve it and get an answer. And it opened a conversation that was extraordinary. And he asked me at some point what I was going to do, being almost finishing up in college. And I told him that with some reluctance that I was going to go to medical school. And I just remember this so vividly. He looked so incredibly, with such power. He looked at me and he pointed his finger at me and he said, "You should get a job in a lab." And I said, okay, how would I do that? He said, well, there's a medical school on the other side of the road. Why don't you go over and walk around and see if you can find someone to hire you? kind of stupid advice, right? But guess what? I did that. And I found someone who hired me part-time. And I just remember again, it still makes my palms kind of tingle. I walked into the lab and I thought to myself, this is what I've been looking for. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't engage someone who, and all of the faculty, some of them, perhaps less enthusiastically than others, are there to talk to you. And for most faculty, there's nothing more enjoyable than having a student stop by to talk, not about a bad grade she got on an exam, not about, something practical, just to, ask about the field, the area, whatever might be on your mind. And as I said, if someone isn't receptive, to say, whatever, and do it again. Because there's so much interesting, not just advice, direction, insights that you can get. And, college is a very special time where there are these kinds of relationships that you can have. It's rare after you leave college to be in an environment where people actually are open to talking about the questions you have in your mind.
Great, thank you.
So I think the advice that I would give is twofold. One is do internships. There are, you live in the Los Angeles area, there are many companies that are here, there are many companies that have internships, and it is really good in helping you figure out what you want to do for your career. And it's just as useful if you do a summer internship and you do not like it, as much as if you do something and you really love it. It really does help you. It guides you with the rest of your studies, and it also guides you in where you might want to work when you're through with school. The other thing, and I have done this my entire career, is to have mentors. And it doesn't mean that you need one mentor. You can have mentors in very different parts of your life, in your schoolwork, in your career aspirations. And do not be afraid to reach out. People would love to help you and mentor you and guide you along the way. And it's something that you should be doing actively throughout your school years and into your career. I still seek out mentors at the time I am in my career. So those are the two pieces of advice I would give you.
Really great advice. Definitely, I would agree with all of them. Perhaps I can add is that recognize that we all have certain skill sets. Some things we're really good at, and some things we're not great at. And that's okay. And I think when you come out of high school, where you have to take every class, everything is required, you want to get A's in every class so you get into a good college, by the time you're in university, you can really lean into what you're really good at. And you can really strengthen those, knowing that you might have some weaknesses, but you will now forge your career path and your educational path along the lines of both your passion and the skills that you really have. I think getting very practical skills is also important. I'll give you the example of my daughter. She studied film at USC. It's one of the best film schools in the country. She came out and she decided she doesn't want to work in the entertainment industry. And currently she's working in New York at a management, it's a consulting firm for media. So it's not exactly what she wanted to do. She's not writing, doesn't have the creative side. But boy, does she learn how to do strategic assessment of things. She's understanding the whole media market. So she's learning very, very practical skills coming out of college that will serve her for the rest of her career, even though that first job is not her dream job. So I think going somewhere, study what you want, do what you love, but know that coming out, you're not going to land that dream job, the passion job. It's great to go out there and get a practical, really good set of skills that will carry you for the rest of your career, and you'll continue to build. Just know that coming out of college, it's a difficult transition, and getting that first job doesn't come as easily. You have to use your network. You have to have done that internship so you know what you want and what you don't want. And then you really have to be a go-getter. You have to put yourself out there. You have to speak to everyone, from your professors to your TAs to administrators to people you've interned with. all of them, you have to go back to them and say, I'm ready, I know what I want. And you have to really sell yourself. You have to tell a story about why you should be given that job and that opportunity.
Wow, love all of this insight. Very beautiful. Our next question is for Susan. With everything you have been successful in during your life and career, what is your favorite experience or lesson you like to share?
So I'll do a lesson, and then I'm going to tell you an experience, which I love sharing, but I've had an opportunity to, but I think it's important. Now, and you know, I love this convergence idea. I just love it. And the reason I love it is I didn't know how fun it was to construct a shared ambition with others. Actually, when you think about it, it's kind of stupid for me not to recognize it, because if you're playing a game together, you have a shared ambition. There are all these things, but I hadn't really distilled it into what it really means. And some of the most exciting and productive and successful things I've done, either in my lab or in leadership, has been putting together people who I recognized had a shared ambition, a shared view of something, and getting them, making it possible for them to work together. And so I think that's a very important skill that each of us can serve for others. That's one. The other thing, it was a life lesson I learned. When I was dean of the graduate school at Yale, you know, sometimes you get some really tough assignments. And the tough assignment I had was that there was a unionization drive for graduate students that it turned very, very ugly, very disruptive, very angry, very mean, frankly, you know, a little bit dangerous. And among the things that, places that supposedly conversations happen were these big, big audiences, probably as big as this, where they would invite the dean to answer questions. And this was a setup. There was no question was set up. If I said no, that wasn't going to work, so I had to kind of say yes. And so I was about to leave my office to go for this public evisceration. And I had a marvelous assistant. I've been blessed with wonderful assistants in all my jobs. And her husband had a real job, but he was a magician. His hobby was I was a magician. He was a very funny man. So I'm getting ready to leave. I was perspiring. I was anxious. And he looked at me and he said, "Just keep smiling. It makes them crazy." Great advice. Everyone doesn't have to know how you feel. And so I did walking this thing with a very different attitude about how to comport myself. And I just think that's really good advice. When you're feeling kind of down and lousy, just keep smiling. It makes them crazy.
Yeah, that's great. Change the mood, love that. All right, Leslie, JPL's mantra is dare mighty things. If you could dare something mighty to get more women into NASA, what would it be? And if you had the chance to go into space, where would you point your rocket toward?
Okay, so first, our mantras have been added to a little bit now. It's dare mighty things together, which I think it really is reflective of how we work today and how we work in teams. So I believe, so in this time in my career right now, I work for a woman. The director of the Science Mission Directorate and the deputy are women. Women are leading planetary science and astrophysics and earth science. And so this is unusual in my career, and I think we are doing much better of bringing women into NASA. The challenge is keeping them there, and that is the thing that we need to work on. And I think what happens is, you know, when women come into the workplace and they're also trying to balance family and other obligations with that, it becomes more challenging. And so I think the things that we can do together to help with that is to be creative about work assignments, find ways to have two people do one job instead of one person doing it, so that you can be able to work part-time, but you can work on something that really is a very interesting job. You could lead a project in that way, etc. And so I think that where we need to start working more is on those opportunities that we can share in the work environment and make it easier for women to stay in the workplace.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Sharon, you and your family have had a huge philanthropic impact all over the world. How can we instill those values in society where personal gain is considered the top prize?
I think that's very important for us to think about as a society, and how do we nurture that into the culture of our societies. You know, for me and my family, as I mentioned, having been immigrants that came to this country, my parents were very blessed. My father was a very successful businessman in Iran. The revolution happened, we lost everything. We were lucky enough to land here in the US in Los Angeles, and he rebuilt his work and his business from scratch again, and again was lucky, like so twice in one life, which was really tremendous. And very quickly after we were settled and he had his first business and he was successful, he came to me and said, you know, Sharon, we need to give back. And there was just, it wasn't even a matter of, oh, I'm going to do somebody a favor. It was like a sense of responsibility. He said, this country has opened its arms, has welcomed us. We've benefited. We have blossomed again. We've rebuilt our lives. We became 4 kids. It was not an easy move. And yet he said, we must give back. So I think that sense of responsibility from a young age that I grew up with, that sense of not only community, but also that we each, at whatever level we can, it doesn't have to be, you know, thousands or millions of dollars. It is about that sense of responsibility that we have for one another. That we all rise together, and when our communities are benefiting together, and we're contributing to that, it is that both that sense of fulfillment that we get by contributing, but also the fact that we see our communities thrive together. So I think starting young is very important. I think instilling that as parents at home is very important. And again, it does not require it to be some major philanthropic, you know, high, you know, financial commitment. It could be anything. Volunteering in your community, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. So I was really blessed because my parents had very clear sight of that. And the 4 of us, me and my siblings, all have now passed that on to our children. Even though they're much more blessed than we were when we came, you know, they've now been raised here in this country. They understand that they have a sense of duty, and they have a sense of responsibility to take all those privileges and give it back. So I think it really has to be instilled from an early age and through parents teaching their children that. And hopefully community will give back. Look at this beautiful hall we're sitting in. My parents, my father's now passed 2 years ago, but my mother, literally I think a week doesn't go by, whereas she's in some part of Los Angeles, and somebody doesn't come up to her, a student, a faculty, a staff, that will hear that she's the Soraya, and they will say to her, are you the Soraya? And she says, yes, and they thank her, and even tonight, by the way. And that fulfillment, that happiness that she brings, that her gift brought some joy to a whole community. There's nothing like it. And so it is that two-way directional impact that you're having. You're feeling fulfilled, you're feeling really a sense of enrichment, and you're enriching it.
Wow, what an impact, what a legacy. That's awesome. Another question for all of you. The ARCS research program is about converging different disciplines to train students to become convergence research leaders in solving societal problems. Can you talk about your experience with working across disciplines and the skills, knowledge, and attitudes that students, especially female students, need to hone in order to do this professionally when they leave school?
Sure, I can start on that. Space is definitely a team sport, and it is multidisciplinary, and it is also, it's interesting, it's not just science, technology, engineering, and math. We need to be able to communicate what we're doing in space, and we need to be able to communicate that to our colleagues, and we need to be able to communicate that to the public. And so how we express that and how we do that with art is also critically important in the message that we have when we're talking about space exploration. And in addition to that, if you look at a team that is building something as complex as Europa Clipper, which is now on its way to Jupiter's moon Europa. It takes all the different disciplines in engineering, in science, in technology. It's a 30-year journey to do that. And you start with these concepts very early, and finally that solidifies into a design, a mission, a system, an architecture, and then that becomes, more concrete design. It becomes hardware, it becomes software that has to be tested and developed, and finally launched, and then operated on its journey. And so every step of that is not one individual. It is everybody working together on a team through the good parts and the bad parts. And that is the most critical part. And so learning how to do that here while you're at the university is really an opportunity. And this type of program that you have here, I think, is excellent for that, and bringing these disciplines together to work on teams starting so early in your careers.
Yeah, I just love the way you highlighted this sense of teamship, and that it's a skill, and something you have to practice with intention, and rather than waiting for it to happen to you. So I think one of the things I learned when recruited to a semi-hostile environment as a leader, and it's and not just specific to MIT, but just in general, what people like to be asked their view rather than tell them the answer. And it served me really well when I started MIT, because I didn't know the institute well enough, and I wanted to learn about it. So I asked people, what are the things that you'd like to do? What is your ambition? And boy, did I get a lot of really fabulous answers. So the big answer was MIT needs to be doing more about energy. This was back in 2004, before it was like the most common topic. And I said, well, what would we do if we did something in energy? And so many of the people I talked to said, oh, well, I have this project that I started during the Jimmy Carter era that would be really about energy efficiency, and I can't get funding for it, and so I'm continuing to do it like in my bottom drawer in the back closet, and I'm working with my colleagues on it, because these things that are done on a shoestring, if you can put two shoestrings together, you can do it better and so that was the basic idea of the MIT Energy Initiative, which was an all-of-campus phenomenon. You didn't have to participate, but if you wanted to, there was a playground where people were hanging out. And so I had never really seen that before. And it was an idea, again, that came out of the people I talked to. And, what's it, engineer your own adventure. It probably doesn't engineer your own adventure, but it should be called engineer your own adventure. So that has a lot of power. The other experience I had was around MIT's cancer activities. MIT has, at the time, had a very, very highly regarded Center for Cancer Research. It was all biologists. Several of them had Nobel Prizes, and it's pretty good. You get grants if you did that. You get your papers published. But then the head of that center, came to talk to me about. I interviewed all the leaders of the various enterprises, and he described to me some collaborations they were doing with people from engineering departments. And I was just completely confused, because I had never thought of cancer as an engineering problem. I thought of cancer as a biology problem. And yet a lot of the approaches to addressing cancer are engineering puzzles that get solved. And he had been promised by my predecessor that he would get a renovation of the lab for the Center for Cancer Research, and he wanted to know if I was going to fulfill that promise. So there was a long line of people with that exact message. So I said, well, what do you expect? And he described something, and I said, but that's just like this current cancer center. What about all these engineers you've talked about, he said, oh, then it would have to be twice as big. I said, yeah, I got that. But was that being an interesting direction? You know, his eyes just lit up. And so again, this idea is let people tell you, you know, what their dream is. I love hearing what people dream to have. I mean, I'm sure you hear this in the realm of space all the time. You know, what is the impossible thing that you'd like to do? And, you know, for me, it's just so exciting and empowering. More important that it makes me really optimistic about the good in people. And that's such a, you know, we often forget that, we just grumble about the bad. But feeling the power of people, you know, putting their work together to become good, I just find infinitely inspiring.
I'll let Sharon wrap this up.
I'll just do a quick, my own life career experience. I studied political science, I was a journalist, you know, I did all of that. Then I went into the area of philanthropy and all that. And then I really got into foreign policy. So imagine all these different worlds, and all of it in my 40s came together in one job, which was the ADL job that you described, fighting anti-Semitism and combating all forms of hate around the world. So who would have ever known, if you had asked me in my 20s when I got my PhD in political science and I was a political economist, and then I did this whole philanthropic work, and then I went to like places like Afghanistan and Iraq and South Sudan to understand our foreign policy. Who would have known that there would be one job that encapsulates all these different disciplines of my life in one place? So the pinnacle of my job, my career has come together in a way I would have never expected it, ever. And I did all these things parallel to one another. And yet it all came together in this one position that took me around the world, really talking with governments and with communities around the world to see how do we combat anti-Semitism and hate. So know that that multidisciplinary aspect of your work, of your careers, even if they may not make sense at this moment, you have to do that. You have to stretch across the aisle in every way, because it will come back to serve you in a very profound way.
Great, thank you so much to our panel for their insights and experience.